Hi, so today I'm going to be talking to you guys about artificial intelligence and the government. So we're going to talk about a couple different things that the government's already using artificial intelligence for, and we're going to end it with a fun little project that the Army is actually working on to help see if artificial intelligence can be used in some of their everyday, like, things that they use. So the first thing we're going to talk about is recruiting automation. So the United States government is the biggest employer, so obviously with that means there's a whole heck of a lot of resumes. So with artificial intelligence, it helps streamline going through resumes. So they use it to help pick out the people who are actually qualified for the jobs that they're applying for. Um, and then once that's done, it helps schedule interviews. But I think the best thing that it does, besides streamline the speed in the process and taking that human factor out of it, is it removes the biases. So let's say you or I were going through resumes and we found this person who was totally qualified for the job, but their name was Steve. And we just don't like people named Steve. We've never met a Steve that we liked. And despite the fact that Steve is perfectly qualified for this job, we choose not to go with him because his name is Steve. So he could have been a great worker, he could have been a huge asset, but because of that, we will never know. So using artificial intelligence, it removes that kind of bias. So the next thing we're going to talk about is cybersecurity. And we talked about that a couple weeks ago. And so what that deals with is vulnerability and threats and mitigating risk management. So using artificial intelligence, they can test to see where their firewalls are vulnerable or where there could be threats in the code, which is huge because when you think of all the different things that the government stores, like, you don't want it to be easily accessible to anyone. That's big red flags if it is. So by going through and using artificial intelligence, it can help mitigate that and risk management. So then the next thing is monitoring financial activities. So they can write codes and learn to detect money laundering, terrorist financing, and fraud. So I think it's really interesting that using artificial intelligence, you can actually learn how to teach it how to detect, like, hey, this offshore account in the Cayman Islands has been getting quite a bit of money, like, red flag. Or that they can detect, like, fraudulent checks going to a fraudulent business. Or, a business doesn't exist, but they've been receiving a lot of money, and what's going on with that. And so it's really interesting because I think using artificial intelligence, they'll be able to go through that kind of information significantly faster than a human. So the next thing we're going to talk about is healthcare and pensions. So what's really interesting about this is they can actually pinpoint employees who may develop work-related injuries. So at no point in your life do you ever want somebody to get injured, but you really don't want it when you could be potentially liable for it. So this is really important because when they detect that, you might be able to be like, oh, well, let's see what their job is and how could we maybe change it so the risk isn't there. I mean, obviously that's not possible with all jobs, but you could maybe fix a couple. Identify fraudulent claims. Like, as sad as it is, people do try to take advantage of the system. So help identifying that and sort and review paperwork. And for anyone who knows anything about healthcare and dealing with pensions, it's a whole lot of paperwork. So having AI go through part of it will really help. So then the next big thing is AI and IoT combined. So when you think of that, you think of drones, which are super fun because they can be used to survey areas and use facial recognition and all that kind of good stuff. But they can also choose their own flight path, which makes them smarter than actually using a pilot, because you can teach them to change direction due to weather or obstacles in the way and whatnot, so they can get to point A to point B by themselves without actually needing a human, which is awesome. And then finally, the Army using AI And their thing that they're doing is what is called next generation combat vehicles. So that means they're taking Bradley M2A3 combat vehicles and fitting it with artificial intelligent technology. So then they, through machine learning, they want to use algorithms to detect when vehicles will break down and have possibly need maintenance, to keep it all up to date and keep everyone safe, which is huge because when you're in the middle of a war, you don't want to be in a vehicle that could potentially break down on you. So finally, with what Lieutenant Colonel Chris Conley said to the Post, I'm not convinced that this will be successful, but I'm really excited about the potential of it. We're doing a pilot test to verify their claims before we do anything to scale. So it would be really huge if they would be able to do something like this. It can really revolutionize vehicles that are used in war and just kind of help make it safer for those in the field. So, thank you.